It's episode 138 of the Author Stories podcast. I'm your host, Hank Garner. Find all of the archives of the show over at hankgarner.com. And there you can subscribe to the show. It would really help if you would click the subscribe button on your phone or your computer or however you listen to the podcast. I'd like to thank some sponsors this week. If you've had a chance to check out thirdscribe.com, but maybe not lately, do yourself a favor and go check it out. Rob and the guys over at thirdscribe.com have completely revamped it and made a beautiful, beautiful platform for connecting authors and readers. If you're an author and you need some help getting your work out there to readers, ThirdScribe can help. If you're a reader and you'd like to get closer to the books and the authors that you love, ThirdScribe can help. They're building a community that's bringing readers and writers together. What could be a more beautiful thing than that? Also, Crystal at Pico's house. If you're looking for an editor, Crystal is one of the very best. She got her start as a Hugh Howey beta reader. She offers developmental editing, line editing, beta reading, proofreading, everything that you need on the editing front. Crystal can do it for you. She's edited over 50 novels and novellas, 125 short stories, including 5 Future Chronicles anthologies, and she comes recommended by some of the very best-selling authors. If you mention Author Stories when booking your services, you can receive a $75 discount on manuscripts over 60,000 words in length or $25 on short stories. Please go check out Crystal at Pico's house and tell her that you heard about it on Author Stories. Now to our great interview. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast Writers Workshop. Today I've got a very exciting episode. I love doing each one of these because getting to talk about storycraft and really tearing apart the creative process really is one of my most favorite things to do. And for the Writers Workshop, I get to have my friends on, and we get to have a little more intimate conversation because we all kind of know each other already. And those make for some really great shows. So as I was making out a list of guests that I wanted on in the first list I made, the Swardstrom brothers were on that list, and I'm so happy to have them with us tonight. And that is Will Swardstrom and Paul Swardstrom, and they have co-written several books together, and I really wanted to talk to them about what makes their writing partnership work as great as it does. So welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Will, let's start with you. You've been on the show before, a couple times, and give everybody a little recap of who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I've been writing for about 3.5 years now, I suppose, professionally, as an indie writer. I have my name on 4 novels and I don't know, about a dozen short stories or so. I'm also a daytime job is I'm a high school social studies teacher at a small high school here in southern Illinois. Wife, 2 kids, dog, 2 cats. There you go.
Being a social studies teacher must be really interesting this time of year.
It is very interesting at this time of year. Yes. Especially in southern Illinois, yes.
We are recording this the night before that election thing.
Right.
So
it's possible nobody will ever hear this because the country may just end tomorrow. So you never know.
It could.
Right.
It could actually implode. There could be wild dog packs roaming the streets tomorrow.
The I Am Legend all over again.
All over again. It could happen.
Yes.
So, might as well enjoy it while
That's right.
While you can. Yeah. So, thanks for coming on the show, Will. Paul, tell us a little bit about you.
So I am a teacher as well. I teach elementary school level music in Oregon. I teach in the Beaverton School District outside of Portland, and I have a wife and 2 kids, and we recently moved into a new house, and that's consuming a lot of our attention right now.
Yeah, I know all about that. Yeah, we moved into the house that we're in like 11 years ago, and it still consumes. It never gets any better.
Old. So I got into writing. My brother, he just was so enticing, so I had to try some things out, and we did a couple of small things together before I kind of poked my head into something that he was working on, and there you go. Kind of took off from there.
Wow. You both are educators for your day job. That's interesting. You guys also have a sister, right?
We have a sister and a younger brother as well.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Any other educators besides you two?
Not professionally. I think my sister does a lot with her church groups and things like that. But she has two young boys that are under the age of 6, so she does a lot of.
She's constantly teaching.
Constant, yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you guys have co-written several pieces together. What was the first thing that you guys decided to co-write, to share in the creative process?
Well, I think, it's not really co-writing, but we did this very short anthology with just our family. And it was Will and myself and Betsy, our sister, and
Baking with Swords.
Baking with Swords, and her last name is Baker. So we put our names together, and we got Baking with Swords. And Will was in the process of writing something already. I said, "Hey, I've got an idea for a story. Can I join in?" And what do you know, somewhere along the line, Betsy came up with something as well. So that was our first foray into something that we all did together.
That's pretty cool. Have you guys collaborated with Betsy anymore after that?
Well, sort of. She actually sent us something to take a look at, and we've both been too busy to kind of take a look at it, but it's in my inbox, so she kind of poked me about it today, and I need to.
I think for her that life with the two young children kind of became a little bit much for a while, and she's just starting to poke her head out of the hole again, and so we'll see what happens from here.
Gotcha. How close are the two of you in age?
8 years apart.
I'm 30. Wow. 37? Yeah. I forget how old I am. Yes, he's actually born on August 16th, and I am the 17th. So just 8 years and a day apart.
Wow. Were you guys, being 8 years apart, like my two sons are 9 years apart, and I would say they're close, but they don't have a lot in common, except for what my older son makes in common with the younger one. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Did you guys spend much time together when you were kids?
I would say not really. I don't know how Paul feels about it, but I was always, Betsy's just 2 years older than me, and then our younger brother is like 3.5 years younger than me. So there was Paul, and then there was a 6-year gap, and then the three of us kind of came more in rapid succession after that. So I always dealt more, I was in high school together with our sister, and, I did like youth group things at church with our younger brother, and so there was always more things that I had in common with them just because of our age. So not a lot growing up. It was actually more later on when I graduated college and my wife graduated college and we moved to Southern Illinois. Paul was also looking for a job at the same time, and there was a job that my wife had applied for, and they had offered it to her, but she didn't take it. And she said, because she's a music teacher as well. And so she said, this might be a good one for you to apply for. And so he applied, got the job, and so he made the move to Illinois for a couple of years. And for 2 years, we lived less than an hour apart. So,
oh, nice.
And at that point, we're both adults. Neither one of us had kids at that point. And so, there was many weekends when I'm going to his house or he's coming down to our house. And so, it was... we kind of developed a friendship at that point,
right?
Beyond just, being familial related.
Yeah,
right.
I would say I had to be reintroduced to my family. The nuclear family moved away from me while I was in my first year of college. So I was living.
Jerks.
I was living in Arizona at the time, and they all moved to Illinois. And so then. During that time in Illinois, it was a good time to be really to dive back into that family situation.
Right. Do you feel like I don't know if you guys have had any other experiences co-writing with anyone other than yourselves, but I would assume because writing is so personal and it can be a very lonely thing. I would think that having a close friendship bond is probably pretty important in sharing that process. I do know of some people that seem to have a pretty straight business relationship with a co-writer, but that would seem kind of awkward to me. Do you think that it's easier to share in something like this when you're closer to that person?
Paul?
You know what? I would say yes. From what I've been able to gather, there's a whole lot of writers out there who think that their first instinct is whatever I just did stinks, and
right.
I can always send something off to Will or Betsy, and then I get honesty, but then I also get, hey, you're doing this well or this well, or I think that has something really cool in it. Let's see what we can do with it. And so it's, in a way, it's an uplifting and constructive experience. Working with Will or Betsy, she's often a very silent partner in some of our processes. She's back there being a cheerleader and one of the first people to read what we do. So.
That's really cool.
I think, kind of going off that, I've had a little bit of experience working with some other authors and through some anthologies that I think Paul hasn't had, and I definitely do value our relationship in that because, it's professional and, we're both making money off of it, a little bit of money. But it's, at the end of the day, we're brothers and, we're just having fun, and I can write something and he'll kind of riff off of it, or he'll write something and I'll riff off of it, and if it's not kind of what we envisioned, I don't think either one of us are really offended by it. And even though we were 8 years apart, we were raised by the same parents, we have a lot of some of the same life experiences where we do kind of have some similar ideas about things. But at the same time, because of that age gap, there's sometimes just different ways of looking at it that, I'll give it to him, he'll be like, hey, how about you do this? And it's like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think, two people can witness the same thing, but they're seeing it through slightly different lenses, and the culmination of those experiences makes something really unique and different.
Yeah.
So what was besides the Baking with Swords, what was the first story that you wrote together jointly? Would that be the elf story? What was it called? Agent Smith and the Naughty Elf?
Not quite. Actually, that came, I think, third in the order, I suppose, of our collaborative. The first was a story that Paul had originally called the Hotbox Runner, but it's now called, what's it, Janie?
Plain Jane and versus Super City?
Yes. Yeah, so we changed the title after a while. But he had originally written the story, and I was putting together this anthology with the some wool writers that I know for a superhero-themed anthology. And I don't think Paul even knew that I was doing this at the time, but he wrote up this short story, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 words, and he sent it off to me. He's like, "What do you think?" And it was really good, but I'm like, "Can I put it on with you?" He's like, "So I sent it to you." So I just started messing with it, and I added in a little minor character or two, I think, and just kind of tightened up a lot of the language that, some of the things that I had learned in the first couple of years of writing, I kind of applied to it, and I sent it back. He's like, "Yeah, that was really good stuff." So we eventually, I think we published it on its own, but then we also included it in the Powers That Be, this anthology. Anthology is for charity, and so that was the first one. And I was like, okay, well, that was fun, and then we kind of I think we just kind of forgot about it for a long time. It was like probably about a year before we ever thought about writing together again.
Yeah, I think it was July, and then it was January. So, yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Half a year.
Yeah.
That year was kind of a blur.
Oh.
Yeah. So when did Agent Smith come into the picture?
Well, we wrote Blink, which is the full novel, based in our kind of universe of the utility company, and we'd had it written, and it's just going through edits at this point, and this is about a year ago. That it was going through the edits, and we're just waiting for edits, and Ellen's going through it piece by piece, and we're just kind of sitting around on our thumbs waiting. And Paul's like, "Hey, we should write a Christmas themed story," and I'm like, "No." And then, but he said it, and it got me thinking. And then, like, I don't know if it was later that night or the next night, I'm like, "All right, I wrote like 1,000 words on it. You want to take a look at it?" He's like, "What?" So, we kind of took the main character from the novel and then put him in this short story where, and the concept of the utility company is they're a kind of X-Files fringe type governmental agency that investigates weird things or things that other FBI or CIA types might not handle. And so they have an elf at Christmas time, and so we made it a very Christmas-themed story in a lot of ways. A lot of Christmas Easter eggs, I guess, as will, in there as well.
Yeah. Fun stuff.
Christmas Easter eggs. I like that. So let's get down to the kind of nuts and bolts of it. And by the way, you guys also have a nearly brand new book out together called Vigilance, and we're going to get to that in just a minute because that book is a little different from your Agent Smith stuff that you write together. But I think a lot of people, the joint writing process just seems like magic to people. I think a lot of people just don't understand how it works, and I'm sure every writing duo is different. But how do you guys approach the storycraft? Does one of you come up with an idea and then you bounce ideas back and forth? Do one of you write an outline and the other fleshes it out? Like what's your process?
A little bit.
If anybody's going, you go, Paul.
It's a little bit of all of the above, actually. There's when we're in the writing process with each other, Facebook Messenger, I mean, just it's like bleeding every day. We're constantly messaging each other back and forth. What about this? What about that? And oh, you were thinking that? I was thinking this totally other thing, and it just gets bounced around. And we never take anything personally because, quite honestly, whatever we were doing with Blink, it was a constantly evolving story. We said for months on end, we should have an outline. We should have an outline, and we never did. We just kind of had this idea of, this thing is growing, and where is it going? It's pretty cool. What's it going to do? And we just kind of let it happen, and it was really, for both of us, I think, a pretty cool process.
Well, there was kind of an outline at the end.
At the end,
I don't know. Yeah, we were like 15,000, 20,000 words from the end, and we were actually both at my parents' house for a family reunion, and we're like, how are we going to end this thing? So we kind of sat down, spent a couple hours kind of hashing it out, and we did kind of form an outline. But even then, like, last couple scenes that I was writing on the book, I wrote them, and Paul's like, "Oh, where'd that come from?" So we have an outline, but I'm totally pantsing it at the same time.
Yeah, the outline was maybe about 40-50% used and 50% thrown away. So yeah, it was, but it's useful.
Do you find that your collaboration is, well, let me ask it like this. When you're writing by yourself and on a project that just you are writing on, do you find that when collaborating, you take less rabbit trails or more rabbit trails? Do you think that the presence of the other writer helps you to stay on focus, or does it open up entirely new possibilities and you just go places you never thought you would go?
Sorry, I'm going to go on this one. It actually is, to me, one of the most liberating things that I've found in life experience. I start writing something, and then he takes over, and he goes in some direction that I'd never occurred to me, and then, like, 15 new possibilities just start popping up in my brain, and then I'm like, okay, which way am I going to go now? And it just feels like this incredible, just wow kind of storytelling experience to me when we're kind of in the vibe and the sync and that kind of thing.
At the same time, though, I will say that in the last book, which I'm sure we're going to get to more specifics of that soon, because it was in somebody else's universe, I felt there was sometimes more walls where I was like, okay, I can only do like these things because, we have to kind of keep the integrity of the story intact to a certain degree. So, yeah, we could kind of play with it, but at the same time, like, there's a little more rigidity in that book. But, overall, when we're talking about the collaboration aspect, it's totally, just and throw something at the wall. If it sticks and we both like it, then we go with it. And I think we got some really cool things out of that with some of the stories that we wrote.
Now, both of you have alluded to and said things like, well, when he does this, then I'm wondering what I'm going to do next. How do you handle the passing of the story back and forth to each other? Do you have some logistical things set up so that I work on this section, then I hand it to you and you work on that? How does that work?
Well, for Blink, Blink was our first full novel together, ended up being right around 110,000 words. So when we did that, originally the process of that was I kind of started and I wrote a bunch of stuff, but I was posting it on Facebook every day. So he saw all of it as I was going. And then after a couple weeks, he asked if he could write something, and he tied it into a minor character that, after I read what he wrote, ended up being the protagonist of the story. When we just turned the whole book around, because he gave me this plot line that I'm like, this is just too good. I tried to kind of hold on to my darling. I tried to hold on to that nugget of idea that I had had in the first place, but then he went off in this totally different direction than I had even expected him to do. And I'm like, this is the story. Forget whatever I wrote. This is the story. So my stuff became the B plot, and his stuff became the A plot at that point.
To be fair, if you hadn't started with that nugget, there wouldn't have been a story. So it was you really were the inspiration behind the whole thing there. So,
oh, thank you.
You're
But anyway, we but from a lot of that book, we simply, like, he talked about Facebook Messenger, and that we use that a lot. But the other thing that we use is we use Google Docs, and we just have an open shared document that is just open to alteration at any time. And the nice thing about Google Docs is you can always, whenever you log in, it says, do you want to see the changes that were made since you opened it last? You can just click on that, and you can just scroll through, if he did something. I'll just go through and I'll see what was changed. Be like, oh, yeah, okay. Or I'll kind of remember where I left off last time, and then I'll see that there's like 1,000 words more than when I had finished before, and be like, okay, I'll read through that. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And that's really what a lot of that book was, is I had, I'd written some, and then I'd be like, okay, I'm going to bed. And then because he's 2 hours earlier, whatever. He's on the West Coast. I'm in the Midwest. Because I go to bed, he's still up for another hour or two. He may write still another, a while that night, and I wake up in the morning, and there's a whole new scene that was written while I was sleeping. And so that's a good chunk of how that book was written.
Yeah, the 2 hour time difference, I think, is a significant part of that, because that means we're not usually writing at the same time. His writing time is more like my dinner time and putting kids to bedtime, etc. So it kind of works out that way. However, Will is also somewhat of a night owl, so after I'm getting ready to go to bed, sometimes he's getting his second wind and getting ready to go again.
Sometimes.
Yeah, I can attest to Will being on Facebook Messenger at all hours of the night as well. Do you guys ever have any problem keeping the voice of the character consistent in that both of you are writing your protagonist and your other characters? Do you ever just worry that you're not quite getting to that emotional place that the other one is coming from?
Well, I'll say kind of the secret of what we've done so far is I think we both kind of recognize what each of us is better at. Not that either of us can't do this, but I'm, and Paul will say this, that I'm better at, like, dialogue and, like, scenes where characters are interacting between each other, and he's better at action scenes. So, if I have a scene where, like, the protagonist and the antagonist are talking through things, and the antagonist is monologuing and doing all that, then I kind of like, all right, end scene, here's the action, go. And so he kind of fills in the blanks from there. And so those, we did that a few times in Blank. But also when we did kind of discover that Agent Smith was going to be the protagonist of that book, I also said, all right, we need to figure out who this guy is. So, for I think like a day, we just opened a brand new Google Doc, and whenever something would hit, jotted it down in there. And we have this whole kind of backstory for him. It's still a little incomplete. To be fair, it's not like everything that's about his life, but, we have kind of like where he went to college and what he did, like in the armed forces, like what his real name is, and I think that he was adopted, and there's some things about his life that aren't in the book at all, but we have it in a separate document, and whenever we do a sequel, we'll go back and source that document and find that stuff. So we kind of have this is who this character is. So we both have this kind of knowledge base of who he is.
And I think I'm also, I don't know about Will, but I'm learning how Will writes, so I'll try to write in a way towards him. And I don't know if Will does that towards me, but I try to, in a way, write a little bit in Will's style if I can when we're writing together.
That's great. So you guys are kind of like an old married couple where you start kind of anticipating each other's moves.
Yes, I wish you would just leave the toilet seat down, though.
Oh. Have you guys developed a sort of shorthand where do you leave notes for each other in the document with little hints and clues as to kind of how you see what they're going to add to it?
Yeah,
sometimes. Go.
I think something that's fun, I don't know if Will thinks it's as fun as I do, but when I catch him writing, and on Google Docs you can watch the other person write. So it's kind of fun for me to, in a way, just, sit down and get the popcorn and just watch him write. So, and get into that process of, as he's writing, I can just pop in with a Facebook Messenger comment here and there and go, either yay or hey, you might want to think of this or things like that as he's going.
Yeah, I think the last time that really happened was it like the final scene or two of Vigilance, and I was writing it and you were watching me write it as I was doing it, and you're like, oh yeah, this is great, and I just kept on going. Another thing too, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you, Hank. Sometimes I'm writing and I start falling asleep as I'm writing, and and when I'm typing, I still type words, like my unconscious mind is still like thinking words, and my fingers just take over and words come out and they appear on the page, but they don't make any sense. Right? It's just totally random words. And so I did this one night, and I'm like, I'm just falling asleep, and I just closed my laptop and went to bed. And I woke up the next day, and I look at what I'd written, and there's like a couple paragraphs at the end of what I wrote, and it's like something totally not what I thought. I'm like, wow, I wrote this, and then I said, wow, did you see this? And he's like, yeah, I did that. So he kind of like saw what I was doing. And, kind of riffed on that, too. So he kind of trolled me a little bit.
I think, too.
That's right. I have never fallen asleep writing, but I did have the stomach flu over the weekend. And I went back and read some of the stuff I wrote in a feverish state, and I might as well have been asleep. It was pretty horrible. So I lost a couple of my NaNoWriMo days. But, yeah, anyway. So, Vigilance, tell me a little bit about this project and how it is different from the Agent Smith stories that you guys have created, where you have just created that out of whole cloth. Well, now you come to Vigilance, which is a part of Nick Webb's legacy fleet, and you guys are cranking out some amazing books in that series right now. But first off, tell us how you got involved in that, and then how you brought your unique Swardstrom Brothers process to that.
I'll start here.
Go ahead.
So I kind of wrote Paul into this. We'd had Blank out for 3 or 4 months, I think, at this point. And we're kind of like, we're both kind of looking at what's next. I don't know that we necessarily wanted to do a sequel to Blink right away, but, we obviously wanted to keep our writing chops up. And I'd had a couple like short stories that I had due for some anthologies. And then I'd seen that I'd read Nick Webb's Legacy Fleet books. And this is before he had even opened it up for his world. I just read them on my own because I thought they looked great and they were fantastic. And then he announces that he's going to have his own Kindle world for his series. And at first I was just going to write a short story for Samuel Peralta's anthology, which I did as well. But then Nick personally sent me a Facebook message and email, and he said, I was thinking about you, and I thought that you would be perfect for writing a novel. He stroked my ego a little bit, and I'm not going to deny that it felt pretty good. And so I was like, yeah, I'll see what I can do. So again, I knew that Paul was probably better at the action scenes than I was. And, you know, this is a space military, space marines type book. So we definitely needed some pew 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 space action of some sort. And I knew I could do it if I had to, but I knew that he could probably do it better. So I said, hey, would you like to do this? If so, read this book and get back to me. So I gave him some assigned reading. He read it, and he's like, yeah, I think we could do it. I'm like, okay, great, we're doing this. So, and what we did on this one, we did a little bit different. Instead of like me writing and then he's going off, we did have more of a specific plan. It wasn't as outlined as maybe should have been, but we did have somewhat of a rough outline for it and kind of a plan of what the book was going to look like. I essentially did like the first 2/3 of the book, maybe fifths,
about
and then
55-60%,
and then he, yeah, and then his part is most of the last 40%. Although I kind of took the last couple of chapters at the end. So, and now we'll tell you about his part, I suppose. Maybe.
So again, about the process though of doing this one, it's in somebody else's world, and there's a whole lot about it that's already completely defined. Some of the things that we had to do, considering that the choice of character that we had chosen was the
just say it.
Yeah, the XO, Commander Hawes, the first XO in the book, what's the first book? Constitution.
Yeah.
And so we started with him, and we know we're going to have to go into his backstory, and you can't do Commander Hawes without involving Granger, the protagonist, all the way through the Legacy Fleet series. So knowing that, and knowing that at some point how they came together, and the incident that became a little bit of an infamous incident in the Legacy Fleet series, the Korsky incident, we had to figure out how to deal with that. And that meant delving quite deeply into the history of that and how was it addressed in the original series, where were things mentioned, what were the specifics, and very quickly I realized we couldn't do that by ourselves. And when Nick started this whole process, he asked many authors, what are your plans? And he did this via a Facebook group. And what are you planning to do? And anybody who had anything resembling anything around that Korsky incident, I was like, okay, let's form a group with these people on Facebook, and let's try to see if we can start to brainstorm together. And for many months, that group of us, all with our own perspective and how we're going to address it from our own story. Some people were prequels, and some people were a prequel to the prequel to the prequel. But how did we get to that point to get to Korsky, and how did it all form together? It was really informative for me to make sure that I got, in my own mind, even if it doesn't end up canon, but making sure that I knew exactly how that was supposed to work together before I could really figure out how does my story fit within this world.
What is it? Well, when you're writing in someone else's world, and in Kindle Worlds, as we all know, is this kind of sanctioned fan fiction, if you will, but it's a step more than fan fiction because it's sanctioned by the author. Do you guys get? I'm trying to think of how I want to ask this question. when someone reads one of your books in a world that you created, the reader doesn't come in with certain expectations because you're creating it as you go.
Sure.
Well, when you step into someone else's world and start telling part of the story, is there do you have a sense of the baggage that readers are going to come in with? And do you ever worry about disappointing readers, or maybe some readers won't understand what you're wanting to do, because you are kind of sharing this experience with readers because they're coming in because they also know the world.
Sure.
Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I guess I'm asking about the weight of it.
I felt
Yeah.
personally a responsibility to get the details right. And I felt like Nick had given us a responsibility, and I needed to make sure that my story didn't go off into any woods or anywhere where it was not the right way, because I knew there would be other people out there who would go, well, this wasn't right and this wasn't right. This was never mentioned in the books. And so I needed to make sure that was correct. However, as will attest, we've since had some comments since the book was published about, hey, this or that is not how I would have expected things, considering the series. And Will can attest more to that if you'd like to. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah. Yes, our book, thanks to an Amazon review, has completely ruined Nick Webb's complete series. So we got that going for us, which is nice.
Well, somebody had to do it.
That's right. Somebody, and now all the other writers who are still writing in Nick's universe, they can rest easy because we've already ruined it for everybody else. So burden relieved. It's going to happen. I mean, even if your own stories,
either
you can
that or
disappoint
it's
readers.
Well, either that or it's just completely pointless for them to write any more books.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe you just single-handedly destroyed it.
Oh, well,
yeah. Well, so I'd written some, wool stories before. That was some of the things I'd written in my first year as a writer. As it was right after Hugh Howey had opened up his Wool Kindle Worlds, the Silo Kindle Worlds there, and I think actually the first Silo story that was in the Kindle Worlds that was not somebody who had already been published outside and they brought in the first original story in the Kindle Worlds with my story The Veil. So I'd had a little bit of experience with that before, but even then, like with that story, I wasn't taking any of the characters from Hugh's books. I just created my own characters in some random silo, and kind of just added okay, what would happen if this person did this in the silo? So I kind of played it safe in that case. But in this case, we took a character, first book, basically the best friend of the protagonist in the first book. We wrote a whole book about him, and it's I want to take some chances as well. We're not space military writers naturally, so I knew this was going to be outside of our comfort zone. I partly did that as a challenge to us, like, can we do this? Is this something to do? And since I'd already had some experience in some of this, quote-unquote fan fiction, I thought it'd be a good experience for Paul as well going forward, that, this is kind of
Absolutely.
what it would be like to do this.
It stretched me. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
And in this case, though, I don't know if I purposely chose a character that was so involved in the main series, but I thought that he could have a really interesting backstory. So most of the novel is all backstory, essentially like 4 short stories, like 4 vignettes into his life, childhood up until kind of where he leaves off the Constitution, and you get kind of this picture of who this guy was and how he became like he is. And there's some shoot 'em up along the way, but it's really a character piece. It is.
That's a great a great thing that you bring up about stretching yourself into a new genre, because I think as fans, a lot of us love to read things in multiple genres. Very few of us read one thing and one thing only. But as writers, we definitely tend to gravitate toward one thing or a small variation of those things. What kind of real practical advice could you give writers for venturing into waters that they're definitely not comfortable with, and how do you make those adjustments, and how do you open yourself up to new things? Where does that confidence come from?
Paul?
Study the lingo. Investigate what the technology is, and try to familiarize yourself with it as best as you can. Immerse yourself in the world, I would say. So what world are we in, and what's going on there? So in this case, it's not just a world; it's a shared universe, and what's going on with that. So it's more of a situational world, I would say. But trying to understand that, and how do things work within that world, and with the technologies, trying to understand those as well. I would say in that militaristic kind of space opera kind of field, that for me, I realized if I were to continue doing more of that, I really would want to figure out how to describe things better in that scenario, because I felt like that was something I kept on struggling with. How do I describe this, or how do I describe that, when I'm trying to just forge forward and just tell a story,
Right. Paul, Will has described you as the action writer of the duo. What was the difference in writing this kind of larger scale action that you see in space opera, as opposed to some of the kind of one-on-one type scenes that you're writing with Agent Smith?
Yeah, again, that one, it took a while. It was kind of a start at the end and work my way from there back to it, back to how. So if this, then how did we get there? So if there was an incident, and in the books, the Korsky incident is this major blowover that happened between the Russian Federation and the United Earth Federation 12 years prior to the Legacy Fleet series ever happening, and basically relegated our protagonist, Timothy Granger, and Commander Haas to basically kind of serve out the rest of their careers on a ship that was not considered the prime assignment in the fleet. So what was their involvement, and how did that happen? So I had to backtrack. I had to go and think, so why would this have even happened, and what led from this to this? And basically, one of the big hangups ended up being, well, Commander Haas, he, at the time that this happened, he's 58 years old, and he's a commander. How is that even a thing? How do we find this guy who is a commander, and yet he's leading a ship into this situation? So, well, we got to have him serve under a captain, kill off the captain. We got to figure out how that happens. Well, there's got to be some action surrounding that, and just the whole process of getting them there, and all of that. So it was just kind of a big process of trying to build that story and how to make that happen. Which, again, as I said before, this was something that, to me, I think it was really a stretching process, because I've not had to formulate something in my that I thought has been so complex of a story before. getting to that.
Yeah, and it actually, like I said, I had kind of written the first like 3/5 or so, and then he kind of did the next huge chunk. And I don't know if he even like really tried to do it. I don't know if he really even tried to do it so much like this, but I still had to kind of like pay off the eventual like through storyline that we were carrying through all of these different vignettes of his life. Kind of this Moby Dick type, Captain Ahab type storyline, Jean Valjean, whatever.
Right.
And so I still have to pay this off, and yet in like 20,000 words that he wrote, he kept all intact, and it even made it even better at the end when I'm doing this court-martial scene, and we get to just nail this guy to the wall, and all of the things that I needed for that he perfectly placed in his aspect of the story, and he not only got the action, but like all the story beats, along the well. So when we needed to finish the story, it was all right there. And I also say he mentioned, this author group that we were kind of in this author group for, and it's guys like Dave Adams from Australia and Ralph Kern and Chris Valen and I think maybe Aaron Hubble as well. That these are guys that they have a little more experience writing the space opera, military sci-fi, and so if we needed to say, "Can you take a look at this?" they'd read it and be like, "That's good. Tweak this. Should this guy be a commander here? Should They were more on top of some of kind of the military details when that's not our forte.
Oh yeah.
So knowing people that are in that field, reading that genre, that's going to be a huge help also for people that are kind of writing in those new areas.
I tell you what, the friendships that you make and the more people that you open yourself up to collaborate with, even if it's just an advisory level, really only helps your writing. I found.
Oh yeah.
Yes, and I'm also getting Paul involved in the Canyons of the Damned as well. So I believe he'll be making an appearance in the spring. So got that to look forward to.
My phone is currently blowing up, and I can't read it right now, but it's all about that right now. So I'll read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's because I saw Daniel added you to the group. Yeah, that's going to become a thing. So you'll have to silence that chat from time to time to get anything done.
You can silence that.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, don't tell Daniel I said that.
Yeah.
With you, Daniel. Anyway, I'm assuming that you guys had a deadline when working on the Legacy Fleet book, Vigilance, and was that different for you than doing your other collaborative works, having a narrower time frame to work, or having a time frame at all to work with?
Yeah, we had actually a couple of different deadlines. When I had first, I kind of made I'd originally decided, I think, what was it, the end of September, I think it was, like September 23rd, I think, was our original deadline, or maybe 7th, I don't know, it was really soon after school started, and as we're getting closer and closer, I was like, there's no way I'm going to make this. There's no way. But something that I had done that was a boneheaded move in the first place, and a very good thing, because I also inadvertently put my name on the release calendar for like October 23rd. So, which I didn't have a second book, so I just had my name in two spots for no reason. So I ended up finding out that I had the second spot. I'm like, okay, I'm pulling up a spot. And so then we had another month and a half to kind of make sure we had our ducks in a row and everything, which was nice. But then we kind of finished maybe a little earlier than what we thought, because Ellen edited the book like a madman, like she is. And so then I'm sitting on this finished book, and it's still like a month out. And the guy that had the slot in front of us, he approached me and asked if I'd be willing to trade. And I said, well, if I can get the edit editing done in time? Yes. And so I think we ended up releasing October 13th. I think it was when it was. So kind of the first open slot in October when we released the book. So, but in terms of writing on the deadline, it definitely made things a little more stressful. I've written on deadline before for a newspaper, so I'm familiar with it, but it was kind of other than short stories that I've written, this is kind of the first time that I had a larger work that I had due at a specific time period. Not fond of that. I think I like the more relaxed, do it whenever you want to kind of thing.
So why wouldn't you? And at the same time, for me on the West Coast here, school was quickly approaching through the summer, and we were in the process of searching for houses, buying houses, packing things up, moving, all before, and we actually moved on Labor Day, which around here Labor Day is the signal of the start of our school year, the following day. So it had been a whirlwind, and it still is. So I was very determined to, hammer my part out and get it all done as best as I could before Labor Day. I don't know that I ended up doing that. I think I still had a little bit to do after I got into the new house, which
a little bit, I think. A little bit,
but did the best I could. So, yeah. Very different experience than the other book that we worked on, Blink.
What's coming up for you guys? What comes up after the Legacy Fleet book? Are you working on a new project together?
We don't have anything planned at the moment. I think to a certain degree, not that I don't like Paul, but I do want to do some things on my own. I still have a third book in a trilogy that I kind of need to finish. Although Paul has graciously offered to help out with that as well, and I may take him up on that. Currently, I'm not doing Nano, but I am. Does it count for Nano if you work on it in November in 2 consecutive Novembers? I have a book that I got about 18,000 words written on last November, and then stopped when the edits for Blink came back. I'm kind of puttering on that a little bit. I have a short story for Sam Peralta's Wool anthology that I need to finish up, but definitely in the back of my mind, and it's coming closer and closer every day, is thoughts of what Agent Smith is going to do next. But we have not set any kind of plans for that.
No.
Well, Blink is the utility company book 1, and I'm going to need book 2 from that sometime within the next few months. So you guys just
we'll just drop everything.
I actually have been working on a list of my favorite books of 2016 that I'm going to do a special show for before the end of the year, and Blink is on that list of books, and I haven't told you guys that yet, but that is one of my favorite books of this year, so I definitely hope that you continue up with Agent Smith, because I love what you guys have created with that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you guys for writing it, and thank you for doing what you do. This has been a super fast hour. Before we go, would each of you guys give our listeners a piece of writing advice? If you could tell a struggling writer one thing, what would it be?
Go, Paul.
Oh, it's my turn, huh? Don't let it die, and keep that idea, germinating. Water it, feed it, come back to it maybe if you need to, but then just keep on at it. There's been times where I leave off something for several days, and then, something will just pop up while I'm in the shower. Shower's an amazing place for ideas, man. I got to tell you. But then, then
lots of clean ideas come out of there.
Yeah. So that's all I've got right now.
Yeah, mine's
All right.
mine's kind of similar, I guess. But you kind of said this. I was on Preston Lay's show a couple weeks ago, and he kind of asked a similar thing. I had some regrets of a piece of advice I'd used on a podcast a long time ago, a couple years ago. Where I'd said have to write something every day, and I've learned since then that you're going to drive yourself crazy if you try to do that. That some people, yeah, they can do that, and I'm not that kind of person. Should I write something every day? Probably, but I also have a 6-year-old boy at home who constantly needs attention. I have a wife who needs attention. I have a job that needs attention, and sometimes you get to the end of the day and you're just tapped out. And so, yeah, don't let the story idea die, but don't beat yourself up over it if you don't write, or if you don't write tomorrow. You'll get back to it, and just don't give up. It'll still be there. Just don't give up.
Well, sometimes the writing happens even if you're not sitting at the keyboard.
Exactly.
Sometimes just maintaining that thing in your mind when you have kind of a downtime does just as much for advancing the writing process as the actual typing of the words. So yeah, I get what you're saying there. I absolutely agree. Will and Paul, thank you guys so much for taking time out of your evening to come on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Hank.
You've been listening to the Author Stories podcast. Find all of the episodes at hankgarner.com. Thanks for listening.